Oh,
All right, it is
okay.
5 o'clock now, and one thing that we're known for with our Mountain Time at 5 programming is that we start on the dot. That way we can finish on the dot and respect everybody's time. So, what we're going to do now is Kevin Kovacs is going to mute everyone. He's going to unmute Maureen and Curtis and Scott and Raul and Mike if he's on. This is being captioned, so we have a wonderful captioner. I want to say thank you to Dula for getting that set up for this meeting tonight. While we're waiting on Scott, we'll see if Maureen has anything she wants to kick in.
94.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be back on Mountain Time at 5. I am super excited. We have such a great turnout, and welcome to everyone to our Mountain Time at 5. I'm just going to make a quick announcement to let everyone know that if you need to reach us here in Colorado for anything, you can email us at assistance@nfbco.org, or you could call us on our extension, which is 303-778 1130, extension 219. Thanks, everyone.
All right, fantastic. Now, Scott, do you have anything you want to add before we kick off, or as we kick off?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was talking before, and the wonderful Zoom follies we all have. Well, I just wanted to say welcome to everybody. We're excited to be doing this evening. It seems that we have a really nice crowd, over 85 the last time I checked.
106.
Well, wow. Okay, great. And so welcome to Colorado. I do want to make an unrelated announcement to what we're talking about this evening, because it is a matter of timely importance. As many of you know, that I now serve in the role as General Counsel to the National Federation of the Blind and help to manage our legal program. And one of our very active investigations is on access to either COVID-19 testing, or particularly access to vaccines. And by access to it, I mean primarily being able to sign up in an accessible way, either using apps or websites. We're discovering that a lot of them are inaccessible. Shock, shock, shock. So we're doing some investigation, and what I'd ask you to do, if you're running into accessibility barriers about testing or vaccine administration, please contact our legal department, Valerie Yingling, at 410-659-9314, extension 2440. Or, this is a really neat new feature that we have. You can go to nfb.org/legal, and we have a legal program contact us form that you can tell us about what you're experiencing. Lastly, I urge all of you to fill out our COVID-19 testing and vaccination survey so we can get your experiences, good or bad. We want to know what's going on. For example, I signed up for the vaccine through Kaiser. It seemed to all work really, really well. And so I noticed that my position keeps falling in line. I guess people that are of a more critical need keep getting in ahead of me, but that's okay. I know I'll get the vaccine sometime. But please do let us know your experiences. And anyway, that's what I wanted to announce. I know it took a minute, but thank you, Jessica.
That is okay. If you are here from the mail pharmacy, the pharmacy by mail, and you wanted a second, raise your hand or unmute yourself. I'm going to give just a couple seconds for that.
If you dialed in, *6. There we go, Pam. No.
You are muted. Press Alt +K to mute your microphone, or press Alt + Space key to temper.
Nope.
All right. Well, then let's go ahead and get going. And if that person shows up later, we'll give them a minute to talk about the mail pharmacy. So today it's Know Your Rights, and we are talking about guide dogs and white canes. And we are very lucky as members of the National Federation of the Blind that we have some very strong rights in this country as it pertains to our ability to travel freely with the mobility tool of our choice. Scott, do you want to tell us a little bit about the history of how some of the white cane laws first came about?
Well, that's easy enough. I would say that the if you want to go, all the way back to the beginning of this in the United States, it really started after World War II and dealing with not World War II, World War One, excuse me, and dealing with veterans coming home who were blind, and a number of different canes were tried. Ultimately, the idea of a white cane became the symbol, the first on record sort of white cane law, if you will, was an ordinance in the 1930s in Illinois, in a small town in Illinois whose name is escaping me right now. But they first were sort of the first ones to recognize the white cane as a symbol of blindness and for drivers and everybody else to pay attention. That, of course, was going on with, there were advocates even before the Federation was founded, such as Jacobus Tenbrook, and a number of folks who led such efforts. And then, of course, in 1940, you have the founding of the Federation. And one of Dr. Tenbrook's early projects was to start spreading white cane laws all throughout the country. And he expanded the idea from just one of recognition to one of civil rights. In other words, the blind have the right to be in society, to be in public, to use public housing, public transit, to travel about in the land. And really, we believe that these white cane laws, which sort of became civil rights statutes, were sort of the early precursors to the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Rehabilitation Act, and so on. In fact, many people don't know that Dr. Tenbrook in 1964 wrote Congress and said, you should include in this new Civil Rights Act that you're adopting, you should include protecting people with disabilities. And unfortunately, Congress didn't do that at the time. But Congress did later on enact, as you know, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act in 1973, which were in many ways kind of the first civil rights protections on a federal level for people with disabilities. And that, of course, only applied to entities that received federal financial assistance, which is a lot of entities, but it's still rather limiting. And then later, of course, we had the Americans with Disabilities Act and what have you. Here in Colorado, because I know we've got a lot of guests from throughout the country, but this is Mountain Time, so I'm going to spend just a minute on Colorado. We saw the Federation advocating very early on in different forms of the white cane law were passed over the years. In 1973, it really became the precursor to the Colorado Anti-Discrimination Act. And basically the concepts that were contained in our white cane law became CADA, as we call it here in Colorado, and expanded not only, of course, to the blind, but to all people with disabilities. We do have specific statutes on, service animals and what have you, and other enforcement provisions. But I think I'll talk about those, Jessica, when it's appropriate. But you can trace basically white cane laws all the way back to the 1930s.
Fantastic. All right. So I want to take a pause for just a second here and give a big shout out to some of our favorite folks here from the Colorado Center for the Blind. We have a lot of staff and students on here today. This is a philosophy time. So, Julie or Dan, do you guys have anything you guys want to say about how white cane laws have kind of paved the way forward? Helped us tap along, if you will?
They probably need to be unmuted.
You might be muted.
Right, yeah.
There he goes.
All right, now I cut us off.
You're good, Dan.
There he
You're
is.
open, Dan. You're unmuted, Dan.
My audio is dead.
You're good. We got you.
He couldn't
Oh.
hear.
Oh, well, Julie and Dan are here. You can hear, but they could not hear us. So we'll catch Julie and Dan in just a bit, and we're going to move along to introduce our next panelist, Raul Gallegos, president of our National Association of Guide Dog Users, NAGDU. Welcome, Raul.
Thank you very much, Jessica, and it is a pleasure to be here.
So I'm wondering if you could tell us just a little bit. Scott's given us a little bit of the history of the white cane laws. Can you tell us a little bit about guide dogs and how they came about? Maybe even a little bit about the difference between guide dogs and emotional support animals.
All right, thank you. So guide dogs have actually been around for quite a while, even since the mid 1600s. You know, people in smaller villages, as they would move around, if they were, blind or whatever, if they could sneak out of the house, would just find a pet even, or just a village dog. And by use of, various different ropes or leashes at the time, dogs already kind of had that innate quality about them to learn. And, of course, the dog isn't going to want to run into anything. So pulling anybody around kind of became that. And so fast forward to the early 1900s, the Seeing Eye was one of the first schools to open its doors, and the name Seeing Eye is so well known that it's I forget the word, Scott may know it, but it's a branding word. So a lot of times when people see a guide dog, they'll say, "Hey, that's a Seeing Eye dog," and it's the whole branding. Just like everybody uses Kleenex instead of tissue, no matter what the brand is. And so guide dogs are specifically trained to assist a blind person with guiding, with moving around. And in the legal sense of the word, a guide dog is nothing more than a mobility aid. And when dealing with advocacy, when dealing with your rights and responsibilities, you can think of a guide dog in many senses as no different than someone when you're talking about their cane or their wheelchair or some kind of a mobility aid. And so that's where the main difference is between a guide dog and a service animal. So the fact that they're trained to do that specific task is where the difference is. An emotional support animal has absolutely no training. So an emotional support animal provides that support and comfort and good feeling by simply existing. So that when, as an example, as everybody may have heard, there are new laws with traveling. The Air Carrier Access Act recently got updated. And one of the biggest changes in that law says that people are no longer allowed to bring their ESAs, or emotional support animals, on board on the plane, and that only trained service dogs are allowed. And so by that definition includes guide dogs.
Fantastic. So now I'm going to introduce our next panelist, Mike Kingston. And Mike has been around the guide dog world for a long time. And Mike, I know, was it Guide Dogs for the Blind that you worked for quite some time?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, and so Mike has worked for Guide Dogs for the Blind. He's quite famous for being a blind guy who actually was able to use his guide dog to get out of the World Trade Center on 9/11, and he has a book all about that. And Mike has been a very proud member of the National Federation of the Blind for a long time. And so, Mike, we're very, very happy to have you here with us. Also a member of our Colorado Center for the Blind Board of Directors. Whoop, whoop.
Yay!
So we're very glad to have you here, Mike. So you've used guide dogs for quite some time now. Tell us a little bit about some things that people might not know about their rights as guide dog users.
So I got my first guide dog in 1964, and that year, actually, while we didn't have an Americans with Disabilities Act and any national coverage, there were already some early versions of white cane laws. In fact, in California, and that included guide dogs, in California at that time, it was a felony under the law to deny a blind person with a guide dog the right to take that dog anywhere that a blind person would go. It was section 643.5 of the Penal Code of the state of California. And we had to use that for me to be able to take my guide dog to school, because the superintendent of our district decided that no live animals on school buses included guide dogs. And we had to go through a fight, which we won, which was kind of one of my first lessons in dealing with this kind of thing. And 8 years later, I joined the National Federation of the Blind, so you can do the math. But what I think people need to recognize is that traveling with a guide dog is as ubiquitous, as appropriate, and as right as traveling with a cane, or however you choose to function and get around. The training of the guide dog is the governing factor. In other words, if you use your guide dog somewhere without a harness, but you're using the leash and you're following your dog and doing what's supposed to happen, that's just as correct as having the harness on. The harness does not make the guide dog, as Scott pointed out, and Raul. The training is the issue. And that is something that we all need to remember. It's extremely important to recognize it today, that it's the training that makes the dog a guide dog, a service dog, or whatever. And without that training, fortunately, the DOT has moved now to make it part of our overall lexicon that service animals are distinguished from emotional support animals and dogs and so on specifically. So you do have the same rights if you use a guide dog. What I would say is not everyone is cut out to use a guide dog. And I'm using guide dog in the generic term and sense of the word. Some people in the past have called them dog guides, but guide dog is what we mostly know. And Seeing Eye is a brand, like Coke is a brand, but guide dog is also the general term, and it's a term that several schools have adopted in their names. So the fact of the matter is that we all can take our dogs with us. We all can use these dogs wherever we're allowed to go. And the DOT is slowly moving us to a point where in air travel, we are able to really kind of work under the same overall mindset as we can with the Americans with Disabilities Act. We're not there yet, and my personal belief is that it is time to amend the Air Carrier Access Act. The other thing that I would say, and we'll probably talk more about it, I want you to understand what a guide dog school is and what it isn't. It is a school. It is not some mystical sort of thing that deserves any more loyalty from us than our training and the reputation of the school deserves. And when we seek a guide dog, we really should interview schools just like they come and examine us and interview us and decide what we can and can't do. We also, as the prospective client of the school, ought to move forward in the same way and interview the school and make sure that we're comfortable with it. It is a relevant thing to do. It is an appropriate thing to do. And we need to remember that we do have rights under the law. And no matter what anyone says, we have the right to have these guide dogs. And we could get into all sorts of debates about schools and so on. But schools need to respect that we are part of civilization and have the same rights as others too. And some schools do a better job of that than others. So I will stop. I mean, I know we're going to have lots of time for discussion and so on. So I'll go ahead and let you move on, Jessica.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Mike. And so, Scott, I know you said you had a couple things that you wanted to throw in about our four-legged friends. So if you want to do that, then I'm gonna have Dan pop back up, Dan and Julie pop back up again, and then I think we'll take some questions to find out what people want to know about their rights as cane users and dog users.
Sure, Jess. Just that in Colorado, our right to use a service animal, as our law calls it, is pretty much exactly the same as is under the ADA. The one interesting thing that is part of our statute is that the dog owner has the responsibility to keep control of their dog and not obviously allow the dog to destroy property or harm people. In fact, our law cross-references the dangerous dog statute that basically says that, you can be liable for penalties if your dog harms somebody, and certainly if your dog kills somebody, that's a felony. So, you got to make sure you keep control of your guide dog. In other words, there's no exemption for your dog from the dangerous animal statute that we have here in Colorado. I would say that, there's several ways to enforce your rights when you feel that they've been violated because of use of a service animal. Certainly, you can file claims under the Americans with Disabilities Act. You're allowed under Titles 2 and 3 to file directly in court if you wish. But you also have the avenue of filing complaints with the United States Department of Justice. There's a complaint procedure. It's fair to say that, civil rights enforcement ebbs and flows with various administrations, and it's not necessarily dependent on party. But I think it's also fair to say that the Department of Justice is going to probably become a little bit more active again in the arena of civil rights. So perhaps filing complaints now with DOJ is more viable than it was recently. So that's something always to keep in mind. And, in Colorado here, we do have a state agency, the Colorado Civil Rights Division, and you can file complaints with them. I have done that in the past on behalf of dog guide users or guide dog users or service animal users, and have had some success in getting enforcement of our state statute. And you need to be aware, though, here in Colorado, that depending on what aspect or what entity is discriminating against you, you have different deadlines to file. And it's particularly important to point out that if you're filing against a public accommodation here in Colorado, in other words, a hotel, a restaurant, a store, or, some entity like that, you only have 60 days, 60 days, to file a complaint. So that's important to remember. You have more time with the Department of Justice. How much time? Well, it depends on your state, believe it or not, because the justice filings usually tie themselves to various kinds of state laws in your states. Here in Colorado, if you want to file with DOJ, you probably have up to 2 years. Now, if you're filing a housing complaint, in other words, your landlord is giving you trouble over your service animal or whatever, you have a year. If you're filing against your employer, it's part of your employment. If you're invoking Colorado law only, you have 180 days. Now, if you're filing under the ADA, you have up to 300 days. And so those are the quick things I would point out, Jess.
Fantastic. All right, Dan and Julie, do you guys want to hop in here for just a second before we take a few questions?
They just don't want to talk.
I'd like to add something really quick to what Scott said, and that is if you file a complaint with DOJ or within your state, it's really also helpful, important, and beneficial if you keep Raul and NAGDU informed, partly because they can help you bring whatever measure of assistance and force the National Federation of the Blind has available to help you, including understanding what exactly your rights are and the process is. So it is really important not just to feel you have to do it on your own. The value of the National Association of Guide Dog Users, it is a group composed of lots of guide dog users with lots of expertise. So feel free to call on Raul and the board and NAGDU to assist. You can get lots of ideas by subscribing if you're not yet to the NAGDU listserv. You can get a lot of support on a lot of different topics there, but definitely it is important to make sure that you use every resource, and there's a lot of support available through NAGDU. And that was it.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks, Mike.
Hi, everybody. Good evening.
Hi, Julie.
Hi, we are unmuted, officially unmuted now. So I wanted to talk briefly about utilizing the white cane law as a tool to educate the public on blindness. And often, you know, what we have done is we all know that often drivers and the general public sometimes don't even know what a white cane is, what it stands for, what it symbolizes, or the same in the same area, the same thing as a dog guide too. And many a time, all of us here this evening have experienced a time when you've walked into a store and they have thought your cane is a pool cue or something like that. So one of the things that we can all do is really utilize and think about the white cane law as a way in which we can educate the public about how we as blind people travel, either using our dogs or a white cane, what it means for us, how we travel, and what it means, and knowing that and teaching the public, and especially drivers, to be aware of us as blind people at street corners and looking for us as blind people, rather than just continually turning right on red and that kind of thing, and not even acknowledging the fact that we are there. And so in the past, we've really worked in getting publicity around this, educating the public about the fact that we are very independent people, but this is what a cane or a dog symbolizes for us. And this is how drivers need to think about us as well. So that's a key thing that also is important to keep in mind.
Absolutely. That's a great point, Julie. So I wanted to open it up to see if people had any questions, if we have a couple questions about our rights. And if nobody else has questions, I definitely have.
Julie brings up something I want to quickly add to, if I might, Mike Kingston. A guide dog is very, very helpful for a lot of us to use, but remember, a guide dog does not take the place of good O&M skills. And if you're going to use a guide dog, you are really obligated to make sure that you know how to get where you're going, and that you know how to get where you're going. That's not the dog's job. And sometimes we do rely on dogs. We teach them a route and they memorize it. I appreciate that, but really, we all ought to make sure that we develop, before we get a guide dog, good orientation and mobility skills, because that dog is looking to you for direction. You are supposed to be the team leader, or in the parlance of animals, the leader of the pack. And you can't do that if you're not operating from a position of knowledge. So it is important that you learn how to do that. And then if you choose to get a guide dog, it's a wonderful thing. And I love all 8 guide dogs that I have had, and I wouldn't do it any other way. But I can certainly tell you that there have been times that for one reason or another, I've not been able to take my dog, like one became ill. And for 6 months, I traveled around New York City with a cane. No problem, because I knew how to do that. And it's important to be able to make sure that you have the most amount of tools in your system and in your control that you possibly can. All right, sorry.
Absolutely. Perfect. Thank you, Mike. And so if anybody would like to ask a question, you can raise your hand. Kevin, you want to tell everybody how to raise their hands?
If you dialed in, it's *9. If you're in the app, it's probably in the More section again, under More, and then raise hand, or in the participants list. Yeah, Alt Y for JAWS. So we've got Nesma. You're unmuted, Nesma.
Okay. Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
Yep.
you sound good.
Okay. So I have 2 questions. I will make a disclaimer before I ask both of these questions, that I am a very, very new guide dog owner and will be getting my dog in a couple months. So, please forgive me if I'm asking questions that, people are like, wait a minute, you should already know that. So anyway,
just go ahead and ask them.
Okay. So my first question is to Mike Kingston, I think, who was talking about the fact that you don't have to have a like the what do you call those things?
The harness.
Yep. The harness. Yeah, thanks. On for the dog to be a service dog or to be a guide dog. What is that harness for anyway? Is that for like public knowledge that they're for service?
Question. We'll let Mike take it real quick, and then Raul if he wants to add anything to it.
Either way, I was going to suggest Raul first, but okay. The harness.
Raul's fine. She just asked, so either way.
The harness is the way that you know what the dog is doing. So look, let's do it this way. You're walking down a sidewalk with your guide dog and you get to a curb. What's going to happen? The dog is trained to stop. How are you going to know that? You're holding on to the harness and you feel the dog stopping. And that's as it should be. Anytime you're working with a guide dog, and the way to mainly work with it in terms of guiding purposes is to hold the harness and the leash, but the harness gives you direct, immediate feedback as to what the dog is doing. If you're in the middle of a street and suddenly the dog jerks backward or jerks to the side, there's probably a reason for that. And you're going to know that quickest if you're using the harness. The harness is the tool that's been developed over the years that gives you the best feedback about what the dog is doing. I'm sure Raul has more to add.
No, I think that's great. That's what I would have said, and we can probably move on to the next question.
All right, perfect. So Nesma, I know you said you have another question, but we're going to actually go ahead and take some others first, just so that more people get a chance to ask their questions. And in the meantime, Raul, I have a question for you, and that is, what if my Uber driver pulls away and I'm standing there with my guide dog, and I'm pretty sure that they left me because I have a guide dog with me? And Kevin, you can be looking for the next hand while he answers.
All right. So thank you for that. And let me just say that this has happened to me several times. One of the worst ones, I was actually getting in the car and the lady outright said, "I'm not your Uber driver." And then they drove off.
Thank you, Ira.
So, yeah. So the thing is legally, you do not have to tell the driver that you have a guide dog when you order your Uber to start with. Some people choose to do that, and that's fine. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I'm just saying that legally you do not have to disclose that information. And so I choose not to in most cases. So they don't see that I don't have my profile picture with my dog in it, because they're picking me up. The dog is just my mobility tool. So if it happens, if I order a car and they leave, what I will typically do is, if I have the time to do this, if the ride still hasn't disconnected the driver from me, I will send him a message on my phone just to say, hey, you just left. I have a legitimate service dog. He's guiding me. I even have a shortcut on my phone, so I can just type in 2 letters, 3 letters, and it sends it off, so I can do it quickly. And I do that to provide some kind of a written feedback that I let him know, just in case that's needed. But if I don't have that, or the ride gets canceled, because a lot of times they'll cancel it or whatever, and then you have no way of contacting that driver, I will report that to Uber or to Lyft, whoever the rideshare company is, and I will follow up with them. Now, during the settlement, which I believe has now the collection information for the Uber and Lyft settlement that we were in, time frame has closed. But during that, we would typically get a call back within 24 hours from someone from Uber or Lyft to take information down. And there was some provisions in there where the driver had to be either educated or eventually even terminated upon, if it was their first or their second or whatever. So even though the settlement period has ended, it is still very important for you to report that, because they need to be aware of this. And if it continually happens, those drivers can get terminated from the service.
And let me just pitch in here, Raul. I believe, and I would have to confirm, but just because the sort of settlement agreement, the term of the settlement agreement has expired, the policies that they adopted weren't supposed to expire.
Right.
So drivers
Correct.
can still be, severely sanctioned for refusing to take somebody who's using a service animal. And we still, if you experience this, we still want to hear about it. You can use that legal program contact us form that I talked about. I do know that there is an effort going on. I can't talk about it much, but to work at another agreement with Uber and Lyft and so on, because unfortunately not all the problems were solved. But please do keep track of it, and please do report.
Yeah, let me add to that. First of all, technically, under the original terms of the settlement, the agreement was in both cases that drivers would get training, and as a result of that, they would be given training telling them about what their obligations were, which were to take any blind person with a guide dog. Unless that guide dog is a disruption in the vehicle, then that's just like people. If a person is a disruption, they can be kicked out, and it's the same thing with a dog. I would get kicked out if my dog misbehaved. But the technical rule was that if in fact you were in a vehicle and or you were trying to get a vehicle and the driver drove off, as Raul discussed, or in one way or another you were discriminated against, that driver was supposed to be terminated as soon as the complaint was filed. And they verified that in fact that the driver left, and drivers do lie, but they can verify it. So technically that's the case. The other thing is, keep in mind, bottom line, we are covered with this under the ADA, pure and simple. And so there is no room for being denied. As far as what will happen going forward and working out a new agreement, as Scott said, there's stuff happening and we'll see where that goes. But they have not always immediately done the one strike and you're out thing that they're supposed to do, which is unfortunate. But the burden still is on the rideshare companies to do it. And if it's still active, I believe that there is a form where you can leave feedback at www.nfb.org/rideshare-test. And I haven't looked to see if it's still.
It is.
Okay, there you go.
It is.
So you can go to www.nfb.org/rideshare, one word, -test, and you can leave your input because we're still collecting data.
Perfect. Thanks, Mike. And so we're going to go to the next question.
We've got Marianne Melly. You're unmuted.
Thank you very much. I'd like to add to what Raul was saying. You can also, once you order your Uber or your Lyft, take a screenshot. And once you complain about the driver who has not picked you up or driven past your house, which has happened to me before, you can send that in with your complaint, with an email complaint, and that's very helpful. That way they can see who your driver was, license plate, and everything else.
Thanks, Marianne.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So we'll go to the next question now.
Oh, I have a question though.
Oh, okay.
Okay, a quick question. In Connecticut, they're changing some of the wording to the laws about guide dogs, and the first thing is they're changing all the guide dogs to service animal. And as far as the training of the guide dogs, they're using professional organizations versus certified organizations. Should we be concerned about these? Michael or Raul?
Well, I confess that I did not know that was happening. And yes, I would be concerned because the wording should be something like either professional organizations or owner trainers. I think that needs to be included because that is just as legal and valid if you train your own dog.
Yeah, training is training, and there is no stipulation as to where it comes from. And there are a number of people who have trained their own dogs. They are still guide dogs because they are trained. If that dog has been trained, then it's trained, and you have just as much right to train your dog as getting a dog from a school that has trained your dog. And the whole concept, are they service dogs or are they guide dogs? The answer is yes. The guide dogs are, if you will, under the umbrella of service dogs, which are dogs that are trained.
Perfect. Thanks, Mike.
We've got Kristen Dockendorf. You are unmuted.
Hi, thank you. My question was about relating to the new law that's been enacted with the Department of Transportation. I've been finding, I obviously take public transit, as many of you do, and the problem of emotional support animals on public transportation is just as bad as it was on airplanes. And I'm wondering if, because this is now a Department of Transportation law and not just an airlines law, does it have any effect on public transit?
Well, there are, and this is Raul, I can answer part of this, and then maybe Scott or Mike can help me with that. So there are three laws, primary laws. There's the Americans with Disabilities Act, there's the Housing, and then there's the Air Carrier Access Act. And so public transportation, the ADA is what applies there. So it's not the Air Carrier Access Act. And so since it was the Air Carrier Access Act that got the new changes, right, those do not trickle over into the ADA. So to kind of put it a different way, prior to the ADA laws being amended, you could legally have a cat with you in your home, like in your apartment, as an emotional support animal, illegally take him with you inside the Uber, illegally take him with you inside the airport, but legally have him with you inside the airplane. So, there's these three laws that don't all agree. So with these new changes, that doesn't cover the bus.
Yeah, the ADA is still the more general
yes,
law outside aircraft. So if you're in an airport, Scott, you can correct me, but I think in an airport, you're still covered under the ADA. When you go onto an aircraft, it's the Air Carrier Access Act.
Yeah, well, it depends.
Yeah, that's what I was afraid you were going to say.
What function if you're just in the facility and it's owned by the city or the state or whatever.
Right.
Yes, but if then you're trying to use an airline kiosk, that's covered by the ACAA. And with respect to public transit, that's an interesting question because that is the ADA, and that the ADA makes it very clear that it applies to service animals only, not emotional support animals.
And the ADA, which is what we would really like the Air Carrier Access Act to eventually totally do, The ADA says that the animal must be trained, and there are two questions that can be asked of you. Is it a service animal, and what service does it perform? You don't have to show paperwork, ID, or anything. And by the way, there's been a lot of discussion about these forms that are now required, well, that are covered under the Air Carrier Access Act, which is left up to the individual airlines as to whether they choose to use them or not. And there's still a lot of challenges to that. But let's be real clear, none of that applies to the ADA. And Scott, just to make sure we cover it, when I was mentioning ADA in airports, I was thinking of a blind person with a guide dog in the airport. That
Right.
still is covered by the ADA.
Right.
The guide dog and travel through the airport. Yeah, kiosks are a pain in the butt. Part of the reason we need to change the ACAA, but another story.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next question, Kev.
Tina, you're unmuted. Tina Reisner.
Yeah, hi everybody. Just a quick question. I've had a lot of individuals who are guide dog users approach me, and this is concerning the right to rent with a guide dog. So the right to rent a property like an apartment or a house for rent, and dealing with a landlord or company. A lot of companies have have breed restrictions in general. So, for instance, I'll just use me as an example. I have a German Shepherd. She's a girl. So, and even I have heard that certain apartments have those regulations put in place, either for the safety of other tenants or for the safety of the complex. And I'm just wondering, I'm fairly certain that is voided because, you know, the ADA and other things like that with service animals. Am I correct, or can I seek clarification?
Scott,
So,
to play safe, you do it. Or go ahead,
Yeah.
Raul.
So as like with always, feel free to add on or correct me. So with an apartment complex, it's the ADA and the FHA, because inside the living space, you're covered by the Fair Housing Act. And so the law says, and I can't quote it for word by word, but the law says that you are allowed to have a service animal that takes up, one service animal to one person in the living space. So you can have that, and there is no breed restrictions with that. Where the ADA comes into play in an apartment complex is like a common area, like the pool, I want to say fun house, but that's the wrong word, clubhouse, pool, those kinds of things, that common area that multiple people will gather in, that will be under the Americans with Disability Act, which goes back to what we talked about earlier. So no breed restrictions, no pet deposits, no extra rent, none of that should be allowed.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, Scott, is that all correct just as it is? It seems to me that's right, but I was going to give the ADA more power, but the bottom line is that neither of those laws specify breeds, and so you cannot be denied based on the breed. If you have a bulldog, a pit bull as a guide, if it is trained, it is not something that can be denied under the law.
Yes, that's right. And, the Fair Housing Act applies, to basically any entity that owns, I think it's 2 or more units for rent. So in other words, if you just have a one-off, somebody just owns a townhome or something, rents it out, FHA really doesn't apply there. But anyway, but in terms of rentals and anything like that, that's the FHA, mostly, except for, as Raul said, the common areas.
But correct me if I'm wrong, let's take Airbnb, where you rent out someone's home or whatever under Airbnb. Is that then something that's covered under the ADA? And so you can't be denied if you're blind and use a guide dog?
Well, that is sort of under debate. Airbnbs have been trying the same argument that Uber tried.
Yeah.
In other words, they're not they're not providing housing. They're just a technology service providing connection. And so there's interesting discussions going on about
Historically, that hasn't worked, but they're still going to try it.
Right.
But bottom line is that the law should still cover them, right?
That's what I would argue.
Okay, great. That's what I thought. Me
Awesome.
too.
Fantastic. So I have a question for Scott real quick, and then we'll jump to the next question. So if I'm in the airport and somebody wants to take my cane when I'm trying to go through security, or if I'm on the airplane and they want to store my cane in the fuselage, do I have to allow them to do that? Or what if they want to put my dog up there?
You said store your cane in the fuselage. Do you want to store it on the wing or in the engine?
Well, in the overhead.
Or in the
overhead.
The engine, would, maybe it could be a good blade, a fan blade.
Yeah, give it to
So two things, Jess. In terms of TSA and canes through the metal detectors, magnetometers, whatever you want to call them, you are allowed to keep your cane and use it while you walk through. Now, they do have the right, if it sets it off or they think it looks funny or whatever, they do have the right on the other side to take your cane and put it through the machine or inspect it in some other way. But you do have the right to use your cane as you go through the portal or as you stand there in the the machine that looks at every part of your body and whatever. So that's one thing. Now on the plane, your cane does not, I repeat, does not have to go in the overhead bin or in a closet. It can stay with you in the main seating area as long as you've got it up against the edge of the fuselage or secured and stowed in a way that it's not going to get in anybody's way. In other words, you can't lay your cane down in the aisle, for instance. But you have the right to keep your cane basically throughout the whole process.
Let's expand that to guide dogs. So going.
Oh no, you can't use them. They're no.
You can't put them.
They can take them away.
They can take them away. Yeah. They can, my understanding was that there was going to be a whole new piece of legislation about whether lawyers should be allowed on. But anyway, we won't go there right now. If you have a guide dog and you're going through the TSA portal, I'll tell you what I do. Once again, they can't take the dog away, but the dog is most likely going to set off the alarms because of the harness. And so what I do is I make my leash a long leash. In fact, I disconnect one end so that the dog is attached to the leash and I hold the other end. I make my dog sit on one side of the portal, and then I go through holding the other end of the leash, which typically does not set off the alarm. And then I will call the dog through, and when the dog sets off the alarm, then the agents will probably want to examine the dog and look under the harness and all that, which every guide dog I've ever had absolutely loves. The reason for doing that is that since I didn't set it off, they do make that distinction. And they won't search me because I didn't set it off going through. So it's just something to think about. As far as on an aircraft, if there's enough food up in the overhead, the dog's going to want to go there themselves, but the airline can't force you to do that.
And Raul, I'd like to add something here as well. Something that I do when I used to travel,
Yeah, what is that again?
I've heard of it. What is travel?
I have something that is called an airport leash. So it has absolutely no metal on it. And so I would take my dog's harness off, because it goes back to the fact that he is still a trained guide dog, even though he doesn't have a harness. And I would do the same thing like what Mike described, but I would take that leash with me. And so neither myself nor the leash nor the dog will set that off.
Well, the harness might, if you don't.
No, he doesn't wear it. I take it off and
you take it off. Okay, I don't. Okay.
Yep, I take the harness off and just let it go through with my laptop.
Yeah. Okay.
And then I'll go put that back on. I'm already doing the thing with my shoes anyway. It's not an extra big deal to do that with the harness, and that way, so it's a little extra thing, and there's no right or wrong the way Mike does it, the way I do it, but it's just some choice.
I have found that doing what I do with the regular leash and just holding the metal hook in my hand, I've yet to set off a detector, because watches typically don't set off detectors, and the leash doesn't add enough metal. The detectors are smart enough to know that. But Raul's absolutely right. There's no right or wrong way. You do what you feel works for you. I like what I do because I think it takes less time. I also don't have to take my shoes off typically because I paid for pre-check, and that also helps. But another story.
Perfect.
Maureen, can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
So I go similarly as you guys through the metal detector, but I am not comfortable taking off my dog's harness, and so I though did get into a little bit of a argument one of the last times I traveled that they were wanting me to take off the harness and I refused to. Was I right there?
Yes, you were right.
Okay. Thanks. Just wanted to double check. I did not take it off.
Maureen, you're always right.
Yeah, you're always right, Maureen. The only thing is they will want to check the dog after it comes through. They can reach under the dog's harness and probe around and so on. And like I said, if unless there's something really strange about your dog, they'll love it. And by the way, I've had situations where TSA people have had a little bit of a pushing match to see which one's going to get to work with the dog. So
I had a funny story actually in airport that I went through that nobody would pat my dog down, so they ended up just letting me go because everybody was so scared they wouldn't do it.
Scared, yeah.
That's happened to me. That's happened.
Question,
that was the best.
We have Sue. Also, before Sue, if you dial in and you want to raise your hand, it's *9. All right, and
Jaws is Alt Y.
Alt Y for Jaws. All right, Sue, you're unmuted.
Alt Y for Windows specifically.
Windows, yeah.
Okay. Here's all of my drops.
Sue.
Susan.
Let's go to the next question.
We got
the host unmuted.
Maria Brad.
Now unmuted.
Bradford. Yeah. Maria, you're unmuted. All right, we've got.
Did we lose Maria?
Amy Rose Bonanno.
Bonanno. Hi.
Bonanno. Amy, you're unmuted.
This is really good information. Just kind of as a new guide dog user and just a few months in, I've been hearing a lot of stories, very aware of things that could happen. Sorry, street cars going by now. Is there some person who's very organized and has a list of, hey, if this situation happens to you in those moments, which you don't know what to do, right? Because I tend to be more emotional. This is a person you can contact, when this happens to you at the airport, because I have traveled during COVID on flights. And right before the form came into play, I had a situation where they're like, well, you didn't write down that you had a service dog, it's because I bought it through a third party. So or something happened, some type of complaint, or, just somebody, I don't know, there's so much information out there. Having a collective list helpful. Just sometimes, you get so overwhelmed, you don't know what to write down. So I just didn't know if there was something like that can be like passed on.
We'll go ahead and let Raul
perfect for
take
you.
that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
All right. So first, and I'm glad to see you here.
Thank you.
So yeah, welcome for sure. So Amy found out about us, a lot of it through our NAGDU communications efforts that we have, which by the way, we have a public calendar people can subscribe to. So I got to give you a little plug on NAGDU there. So I encourage anyone who has questions like that, because these are extremely important and extremely valuable. Please contact the board. The address for NAGDU is very easy. It's board, and that is BOARD, not BORED. So it'll be BOARD at nagdu.org, and it will reach the entire board of directors. And one of us will be happy to answer questions like that. But let me just say this, is that knowing what your rights are and your responsibilities are ahead of time when you're not under stress of travel, because traveling is already stressful as it is.
Yeah.
So knowing those ahead of time and doing a little bit of research, I think will help. But also, let's say that you're on the plane and something happens where you have a flight attendant who's making up laws as they go, right, Mike? They're making
Yep.
up laws as they go. You can ask for what is called a CRO, which is a complaints resolution officer. Many times they will, their job is to basically help fix problems that arise. But a lot of times I found that the couple times that I invoke that right, that all of a sudden the problems kind of solve themselves, because they don't want, the flight attendants don't want to delay that plane from leaving. So, and Mike, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, the only other thing I would add is we do have a NAGDU hotline,
Oh, do we? I didn't know that.
888 NAGDU 411, which has information, and I'm not sure who all is monitoring the line, but we do
Well,
try to. Yeah, go ahead.
It's our hotline's a little ill right now. So
Is it ill?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it came down with COVID. So we
okay. I wasn't
yeah.
sure. I wasn't sure, but it is something that will become better because it's been vaccinated and it can't die. It just needs time then. Okay.
Yes.
But the point of the hotline is it has several things on it. One is a lot of information, even by state with laws, and people staff the line so that when you have a problem, the intent is to be able to have people who can respond to you by having a direct conversation with you, and they can also assist. So the line needs to become a little bit better again, and that will happen. We'll make sure it gets what it needs.
Fantastic. And Raul, could you repeat the email one more time, please? The board email.
Sure. The email is board@nagdu.org, and I can put it in the chat here shortly. So it's
Kovacs is
BOARD.
doing it right now.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yep. So BOARD@NAGDU.org.
All
And
right. I'm sorry.
just as another point is, if you're on the NAGDU Facebook page, I welcome you. If you're not, please come join us. But the board of directors are listed there, and the same thing on our webpage. And typically you can reach individual board members by the first initial and the last name at nagdu.org. And of course you have to know how to spell names like Gallegos and Sandoval and all that stuff. But I would just recommend board@nagdu.org just to be sure it gets to everybody.
Fantastic. Kevin, do we have any other questions?
Hillary McFadden, you're unmuted.
Hi. Why did some people say the mentally ill cannot have a guide dog?
Ooh. Because of bias. First of all, I don't know what mentally ill means.
Mentally.
No,
well,
I know what you're saying, but I mean, the point is that's still such a nebulous term. Is a person mentally ill if they're bipolar? I mean, all I'm saying is that the bottom line is that there is a lot of prejudice. Schools have demonstrated the prejudice, but there certainly is no law that determines what makes you eligible or not for a guide dog other than a visual acuity. But the bottom line is some of the schools have been very discriminatory about these kinds of things, and it is a problem. But there is no, go ahead.
Well, I would say, if a school, for example, is saying they don't want to give you a guide dog because you are mentally ill, you can make a very strong argument that they're violating the ADA and discriminating against you on the basis of your disability, mental illness. Now, the defense they could have, and this would be a defense in any situation involving mental illness, is if the disability is somehow a direct threat to you or others, and then I suppose in this instance they would try to argue to the dog maybe, that they would have to prove that. They would have to demonstrate that You know, your mental illness is not in control. Your mental illness is not manageable, et cetera, et cetera. But they can't, you know, they just can't carte blanche say, you know, because Mike Kingston has has a history of depression or whatever, you know, we're not going to give him a dog.
And schools try that, but the bottom line is, under the law, you have lots of protections, and they have to make a case to demonstrate why you specifically can't use a guide dog, why that is a problem. And unless they can do that, then they don't have the right to deny you access.
All right, so we are at now 5 after the hour, and we still have about 6 or 7 more questions. I wanted to find out if our panelists have time for those or if we need to wrap up.
The usual
Raul here.
provision in my contract, Jessica, double time.
All
Okay.
right,
Me
all right.
too.
I'll put the check
I can
in
stay
the
for a
mail.
little bit.
I did consult with my law firm, and they said, you know, if the price is right, we'll do anything to help.
Excellent. Well, you know, we'll triple what we're paying you now.
That's what I thought.
All right, so we'll take a couple more, but please feel free, panelists, when it gets to that cutting off time, you know, to just let us know.
All right, phone number ending in 7747. You're unmuted.
Okay, I'm Holly Frisch from Virginia, and I have 2 related airline questions. One is, do you have any idea why people with guide dogs are required to have their hands swabbed? And second, what is the problem with these new body scanners that they say aren't built for a dog to go through? And what do you do if that's all the airport has?
You want to do it, Raul? You want me to do it, or?
Go ahead on that one. You're more traveled than I am.
Okay, so let's do what the hand swab first. Typically, the issue isn't just that you have a dog. A lot of times, they will swab hands. The whole idea behind the hand swabbing is to test for certain chemicals that can be used in explosives. And they may very well ask you to be hand swabbed because you have a dog. Well, they're also testing your hands to see if you've handled explosives and then you've been handling the dog. But it isn't just blind people with guide dogs that get swabbed. It's something that happens to a significant number of people. Oftentimes it's random. For a while it was everyone. Now it's more random. Frankly, I wouldn't worry about it. It's not a big deal. At least I've never been bothered by it. And your second question was what again?
About the body scanners.
About the body scanners. Oh, well, the issue is they're made to scan a person, and you're supposed to go in not carrying anything other than your weight. And so the problem with the body scanner is if you're in there with the dog, and by the way, I don't buy for a minute that that's the only method available at any airport, because they can at least do hand scanning and hand wanding. But the body scanner can't really function if you and the dog are in there. I went into one because I wanted to learn about it. And so early on, I talked to an agent, and they're also not all that large. But if it's scanning you and the dog is there, then they're scanning the dog as well, and it doesn't give them a good scan to look at.
Next question, Kev.
Corey Thompson, you're unmuted.
Okay. Now, as far as the dog goes, is there ever a time where a blind individual would be encouraged to also have their cane with them? Not using it necessarily, but just bringing the cane every time you need to go out and you're using a dog.
Oh, please, let me answer this one. Yes.
You go ahead, and then I will.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay. I always carry a cane. I always have a cane with me.
I don't have a dog. I'm just considering getting one in the future now. And I'm gonna learn all this stuff.
I have purchased. I tried I have an NFB micro cane that I bought that I use. That fits in the front pocket of your pants. Even they're that small. But I also carry, with me anytime I travel. I always have a cane with me in my bag or whatever, because again, you never know if your dog's going to get ill, something's going to happen or whatever. But there's always times that, and this is just my own style. Not everybody does this. There are times that my dog my dog will, I never have to worry about falling downstairs with my dog. My dog is like overly cautious, but every now and then he'll stop at something. And even though I encourage him to go forward, if I kind of reach out and I don't feel anything there, that's where sometimes I'll whip out the cane because I get that extra reach. So I kind of combine, the both tools to kind of give me that idea. And that way I've been able to find stuff that my dog's a little overly cautious about. So there's a lot of reasons to do that. So I always tell every guide dog user that always have a cane with you, whether it's a folding cane, collapsible cane, micro cane, something you just carry with you. Obviously not to use it in, the swiping gesture as you're using your dog, then that's a little inefficient.
Same answer. The only thing I'll add to it is I've been in hotels where I want to go down to the ice machine and get some ice. Rather than harnessing up the dog and going and getting the ice or whatever, I will just pull out the cane. Dog stays in room, is fine for 30 seconds alone or whatever. If it's a different floor, I won't do that. But if it's on the same floor, I'll just pull out the cane and go get the ice and come back. But I also always absolutely carry a cane all the time.
All right.
Next question.
Will Lewis, you're unmuted.
Hello. So I just recently learned that United Airlines is doing a new thing where they are using shuttles to different places.
Yeah.
So when it comes to that, you're not longer in the airplane, but you're still working with the airline. Does the airline guidelines does the travel air apply there, or is it still? Of course, it's still probably under the ADA. So
now that's a fascinating
That's a
question.
good
That'd be a real
question,
interesting
yeah.
legal question.
But today,
United
in
would
a sense, it
certainly
doesn't
argue
matter.
that
They're both
it's
covered under the law.
well. United would argue that that they're still covered only by the Air Carriers Access Act. But you could certainly, I would guess that in almost all those instances where they're using shuttles of some variety, United itself is not operating that. They're subcontracting that out. And whoever is operating that entity, that motor coach company or whatever it is, that probably is just clearly covered by the ADA. So that's interesting question.
It is a great question. I think we should see if I don't know that there's any real history that would help us answer that better, but I would still say under either law, with a guide dog, you're covered. They can't kick you off the shuttle because you have a dog.
Yeah, I would
Absolutely
guess
not.
that. Yeah, I like to add what Scott was saying is that if they have to pay regular insurance, regular driver's license, regular blah 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 in the public, then that to me says ADA. But yeah, that's a good question.
Great question. And do we have any others?
Nancy, you're unmuted.
Hello. Can you, I think it was Raul who mentioned the complaint resolution officer. Can you give us an example of an instance where someone can request to speak to that officer?
Yes, one of the most common ones that I have run into is, sir, you have to sit in bulkhead. No, this is Southwest. I would like to sit in the 5th row. No, sir, you have to sit in bulkhead. Federal law says you have to sit in the bulkhead. And if they're insistent on it, then that would be a good incentive to maybe consider a CRO.
We've got
Carry it to another airline. American Airlines, for example, assigns you seats. I get seat assignments and I do it early whenever I can before going on a flight. And I've had many instances where they try to switch my seat and they'll use everything from, oh, there's more room in the bulkhead to it's the law. And the answer to all of those is no, there's not more room in the bulkhead. I guarantee you, I've got the experience that you don't. It is not a federal law or any kind of law. And I've had to have some pretty significant battles in the last several years over it. But the bottom line is I can always ask for a crow and they have to deal with it. And some of them have said it's our policy. And that's the other thing, by the way, when they say it's the law or our policy, bring out the manual and show me, because they're required to have all that stuff on the aircraft. And of course, when they go looking for it, guess what? It's not there.
All right, we've got Marianne. You're unmuted.
Oh, you unmuted me all the way. Thank you. I was looking for my pocket so I could do that. Two things. For one thing, when it comes to that, I like to tell airlines my dog is my carry-on luggage. I choose to put it in front of my feet. And in a bulkhead, you can't put your carry-on luggage in front of your feet. So therefore, that doesn't work for me. That's one of them. But the other one I wanted to just share is that pre-check is worth it for anybody who travels more than once in a year or whatever, mainly because, frankly, the people who work the lines at pre-check and who work the scanners and so on and so forth seem to be the best trained people at TSA.
Yeah. So I want to talk about the whole bulkhead thing in a second. Here's the main reason I don't like the bulkhead. I believe it is, for a guide dog especially, the least safe seat on the aircraft. People can argue about my dog has more room and this and that and the other stuff, but here's the deal, as Joe Biden would say, who's speaking right now in the background. Here's the deal. If you're in a bulkhead row, what's to restrain your dog if suddenly there are turbulence? And we hear on a regular basis of airlines that have gone through turbulence and people get thrown up to the ceiling and all sorts of things happen. What's to restrain your dog if your dog is in the bulkhead row? If you train your dog to go under a seat in a non-bulkhead row, so like their rear goes under the seat and their head is on your feet, it's out of the way, it's restrained, the dog feels safer, and there will not be a problem when there are turbulence. Now, some people may not want to do that. I will defend your right to do that, but I believe that it is not nearly as safe. And I've been on airlines and aircraft with really significant turbulence, and I've been so glad that a long time ago I adopted the policy of bulkhead is not a safe place to be.
You hit an air pocket, and sometimes that's all it takes too. I mean, the airline is in a free fall, airplane rather. I would like to add one more thing. I have to get going, but I do want to add one more thing to this, is that if you're a guide dog user, or you think that maybe your dog can't handle going underneath the seat, something that I would do is go out to your backyard and just get a couple of chairs and line them up one in front of the other. You sit at one and have your dog, crawl in underneath the other seat and praise them up. And that's good, non-stressful training, so that that could help in those situations where if you haven't traveled or whatever.
All right.
All right, we have one more question and then we are done.
Krager, I asked you to send your request to unmute, Krager.
And as we're waiting for the question, I just want to remind people, if anybody wants to contact us offline, you can always write us at assistance@nfbco.org. And you can put a question there, and if we need to direct it to Mike, we'll do that, or to Raul or whoever, assistance@nfbco.org.
Hello, just real quickly. How does the law apply if you're flying international?
If you are a traveler leaving from the U.S., the airlines are still obligated under the Air Carrier Access Act in the U.S. But I would really seriously look at whatever the requirements are once you get to your destination and so on, because they are different in different countries. And you don't have the same rights in other countries that you have in the United States. In Japan, there are some limitations. In Australia and New Zealand, there are some very significant limitations and restrictions due to the fact, New Zealand especially, that they're a rabies-free country. It doesn't mean you can't take your dog, but you need to deal with making sure you understand what the laws are where you're going. Raul, have you done any international travel?
Yeah, and then of course, if you're flying on a U.S. carrier, and taking that U.S. plane to an international destination, I don't think they can say that as soon as we crossed over the coastline,
Yeah.
with the Air Carriers Act, Access Act no longer applies to us now. The other international issues, that's sort of one that I should research a little bit more.
I don't think they can say that the act
I-
doesn't apply as soon as you cross over, and they can kick your dog off the airplane, though. But yeah,
Right. I mean, I know, for example, in a cruise ship case that came up several years ago, cruise lines tried to argue that, well, we're a Panamanian flagged vessel. The ADA doesn't apply to us. And, the court basically said, if you're going to dock here and you're going to pick people up and leave and come here, go to and fro, the ADA applies to you. So too bad,
Yeah.
so sad.
So you are probably well protected, because I think that they would say the same thing about the ACAA, but the issue isn't on the airplane. The issue is when you get where you're going, and you really need to make sure you know what the laws are.
All right. And then in the chat, we had a college student that is getting a dog or is new to it. Is there anything that they need to let the disability office know, or will they know what needs to be done and how things need
Well, the level of expertise varies from disabilities office to disabilities office, but you should be the one to know what to do. They can't deny you or discriminate against you in any way because you have a dog. The disabilities offices are supposed to be there to serve students, although they think they're always the experts, and they're not. So the bottom line is that you really should know. Do you need to tell them anything? No, you don't. That's all covered under the law. You want to establish a good working relationship with your Office of Students with Disabilities, but dogs don't enter into that, period. You don't need to give them advance notice that you're bringing a guide dog when you go to school. Not under the laws.
Fantastic. Well, thanks everybody for being with us tonight.
Is Raul still here?
I think he
had to hop
dropped,
off, I
yeah.
believe.
He
Yeah.
disappeared. Okay, great.
Yeah. So I just wanted to say thanks to everyone for joining us tonight. If you did miss any part of the call and you'd like to catch it, it is up on our NFBCO Colorado YouTube channel. And again, you can email us at assistance@nfbco.org if you have any questions. Thanks everybody, and have a great night.
The recording will be posted?
Yeah, we're going to
Yes.
put it up.
Right.
It's already up.
Cool beans.
All right. Well, thank you. Have a great night, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Great stuff.
Thank y'all. This is great.